Well, thanks for watching. Your feature presentation will start in a moment.
But first, a quick reminder.
Subscribe to our full podcast.
Wherever you get yours.
Wherever you get yours sounds weirdly saucy. Okay, so, obviously, new Paul Thomas Anderson. He's the guy behind Boogie Nights, Master, Phantom Thread, and, of course, Punch Drunk Love, which I love. This was made, as you said in that interview, very much under the banner of the Nina Simone phrase, freedom is no fear, to which, Benicio del Toro's character adds, like Tom Cruise. And I think this was a film that was made with the freedom of no fear. It is Paul Thomas Anderson's most brilliantly, epic production. I mean, certainly since Magnolia, which is a small movie by comparison. I know it's one of your favorites. Johnny Greenwood's most out there score since There Will Be Blood. Also, just in terms of how much the movie cost, I mean, it's an expensive movie for Paul Thomas Anderson, but bear in mind, Leonardo DiCaprio is bankable. So that's probably how it's all come about. More suggested by them based on Vineland, again, as was described in that interview by Thomas Pynchon, who, of course, Paul Thomas Anderson had previously adapted in Inherent Vice. Now, I have to say that Inherent Vice was my least favorite Paul Thomas Anderson film. This is right up there with my favorites. Shot on VistaVision, as you said, which VistaVision puts it through the camera horizontally rather than vertically, means you get a kind of clearer picture. It was really interesting that Paul Thomas Anderson said what he liked about the VistaVision format was it can do big and it can do small. And he's talking about the clarity of the image in those circumstances. And the story, and there's no point in attempting to do a plot synopsis. Also, I don't think Paul Thomas Anderson would like the story to be explained because I think it needs to unfold. It is essentially, as he said in that interview, what happens when revolutionaries collapse in on themselves. And he described the film as a kind of collage of deserts, car chase through that river of hills, pursuit, evil forces. So just as a setup, so Leo is Bob, who we first meet as a revolutionary. He's teamed up with Tiana Taylor's Perfidia Beverly Hills, who's a revolutionary who both appalls and excites Sean Penn's Colonel Stephen J. Lockjaw, who's a character and name who could have walked straight out of Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove or Full Metal Jacket. So after Perfidia is captured, Bob and his daughter Willa, played by the brilliantly named, as you pointed out, Chase Infinity, who really is a discovery handed down by the movie gods, goes into hiding. But years later, all you need to know is the past resurfaces and both find themselves fighting one battle after another. And again, as Paul Thomas Anderson said, this is about what happens when the past comes back to haunt you. I remember reviewing There Will Be Blood and saying that after about, half an hour or something, I was thinking, this is redefining the grammar of cinema. And that's a phrase that I've stuck to in terms of that film. Half an hour, three-quarters of an hour into this, I was thinking, what on earth is going on? Where is this going? Where on earth is this all going to? It is a bewildering experience, a genuinely surprising movie made at a time that no movie that cost this much money should possibly be this experimental. I mean, I was reminded of watching Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins and thinking this is the biggest art house movie I've ever seen. The only way of describing this, well, let's have a go. So it's kind of like, imagine what It's a Mad, 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 Mad World would have been like if it had been directed by Stanley Kubrick and it was actually any good. Sorry to Dave Norris. Or imagine if the Blues Brothers had been anything like as funny as it thought it was. Incidentally, a key element of the Blues Brothers is laughing at the Nazis. And that whole thing that you brought up in the interview about the white supremacists who are laughably stupid, who are just, the Christmas adventurers, who are laughable. And I think there is an element of that here. There are things in this movie that everyone will, unless you don't like cinema, it's impossible to see this and not find stuff that you'll love. I think there's also things in it that some people will just reject and hate, but in a way, it's the combination of those two things that makes it unmissable. It is a brilliant mix of chaos and order. And for me, and again, you brought this up in the interview, the thing that really holds it together is Johnny Greenwood's music. Paul Thomas Anderson, when he was talking to you, said, well, it's kind of all over the map, but that's what the movie is like. And he talks about the percussive energy and the percussion also being the piano and then the Baden Powell guitar and Ligeti-like use of an orchestra. And there is one extended sequence which is just bananas, which is like 20 minutes long and is held together by this piece of music by Johnny Greenwood. If you think about, like, in Spencer, Johnny Greenwood did this thing about taking a classical orchestra and then replacing them one by one with freeform jazz players to kind of give the sense of order and authority collapsing. Well, in the case of this, it's like it starts from a point of chaos and goes there from there. I remember in a recent interview, you asked somebody, how do you write chaos? Well, this is like, how do you orchestrate?
Paul Greengrass.
Paul Greengrass, exactly so. Here, how do you orchestrate chaos? And an interesting thing happened, because this isn't just a plug. I have, I've just finished writing this book about film music, and I'd interviewed Johnny Greenwood quite a lot about it because I love his scores. Anyway, he sent me this. I was asking him about how he'd done this amazing score. I think this score is amazing. This absolutely deserves to win the Oscar. Whether it will or not, who knows? But it is clearly the most adventurous score of the year. And he sent me a message, said, it's amazing what happens when you connect shonky homemade software to a real mechanical piano and a drum kit. It's very old and new tech having unnatural issue. But if anyone asks, I played every note of that 20-minute cue. And then he sent me a little video of this machinery, this Heath Robinson-like machinery, actually physically playing percussion and actually physically playing that mad piano thing. And I think Johnny Greenwood's range is amazing. I think if you look at what he did with There Will Be Blood, if you listen to The Beauty of Fandom Thread, if you listen to this, it's like Mika Levy, whose work goes from Under the Skin to Jackie to Monos, literate across the board. But in the case of this, it's the most perfect distillation of what's going on screen, and it manages to weld it all together, this sense of organized chaos, this sense of old and new, of past and present, of acoustic, and it's genuinely breathtaking. I would say that I think Sean Penn is probably a deadlock for a supporting actor Oscar, wouldn't you think? In any other film, the amount of time he's on screen would be the amount of time that the lead actor was on screen, although actually Benicio del Toro has probably got a look in there. Leonardo DiCaprio gives it all, but let's never forget that his presence is probably the thing that made this able to happen.
I think he's very good.
He's really good.
You completely believe him as a stoner, useless, washed up,
yes,
insecure revolutionary who's making a pretty bad job of bringing up his daughter.
Yes, and also in some performances in the past, he has leaned into being a Benicio del Toro caricature. There is none of that here. I think this is his most distant. This is like the antithesis, for example, of the performance that he gives in Terry Gilliam's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So, and then of course you've got these brilliant performances by Tiana Taylor and Chase Infinity. The casting is great, and the casting is perhaps a gift from the movie gods. But the thing I'd say about it is, I knew when you sent me a message after you'd seen it saying, I think this might be the film of the year. And I was kind of terrified, because whenever anyone says that, it's really worrying. But I did sit there thinking, I love cinema. And I love the way that this. There is so much going on, and it is so out there, and it is so far off the map in terms of what you're seeing. It was genuinely surprising, genuinely outrageous. Genuinely outrageous. You were talking about the permission to laugh, and there is plenty of bits in it that are laugh out loud funny, but it does have a proper heart to it with those characters. If Johnny Greenwood doesn't at least get nominated, and I think that win the Oscar, it will just remind us once again that the Oscars are nonsense, and the Oscar for Best Score is often particularly nonsense. But I just came out of it thinking, well, the same as you. It's not a short film, and I could quite happily go straight back in and watch that all over again, because it was blimey Charlie and then some.